Welcome to Spiritually Danger Close. I'm your host, the Latter-day Retainer. This podcast will primarily be the reading of previously posted blogs from Blogspot of the same name. The blogs are things that I feel impressed to talk about. I want to add some depth to ideas, which leads to some research into them. The expressed viewpoints are mine and not necessarily that of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Rough Draft Rolling, a review of Joseph Smith, Rough Stone Rolling. In December of 2020, I went for a long 13-kilometer run, which led to a bone fracture caused by shin splints. While I have immensely missed the cardio routine of running, I'm again slowly returning to my pre-injury fitness level. Lesson learned is make sure you stretch before and after long runs. While I was able to do upper body in the gym as I was still weight limited, I didn't get the workout clarity that I was used to from high intensity training. Well, today I went for a measly bike ride, cruising at a 24-kilometer-hour pace, and was able to experience some of that super clear workout brain. While the workout clarity wasn't long in duration, it was very clear. On Twitter, I asked if I should write a review on the book Joseph Smith, Rough Stone Rolling by Richard Lyman Bushman. The tweet faded away with all other tweets. I didn't have a very big response in the affirmative. I put off working on a review, but I've been thinking that I need to write one. I want to go over 4 key points of why I think this biography on the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is an absolute must-read for every member. First, who is Joseph and why does he matter? Second, who is Richard Bushman and why is he qualified to write such a biography? Third, how can we look at the past with a present tense paradigm? Fourth, what is a literature review and why is it important in a biography? Finally, my actual review of the book based off of the 4 points. Who is Joseph Smith? If you haven't heard of Joseph Smith Jr., maybe you've heard of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. Members of the church are culturally known as Mormons or Latter-day Saints, but prefer to be referred to as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Joseph Smith was born on December 23, 1805, to his parents Joseph Sr. and Lucy Smith in upstate New York. His ancestors fought in the Revolution and worked on as living as farmers. In Palmyra, New York, churches started springing up due to the spiritual revival, with 4 being near Joseph's home. All churches claimed to be the one teaching the correct doctrine of Christendom, which was confusing to a teenage Joseph. The revivals were significant as not much else was occurring, so many became involved in the 2 subsequent revivals of 1816 and 1817. This led to Joseph to begin a spiritual journey, wanting to know which sect was right. One spring morning, he left out to go pray in a grove of trees. The response of his supplication was unexpected. According to his word, he had a visitation of the very Elohim of the Bible, along with Jehovah, or the resurrected Jesus Christ. This is referred to as the first vision and is what led Joseph to becoming a prophet. During the first vision, Joseph reports he was told, quote, was answered that I must join none of them, for they were all wrong, end quote. He tried confiding in several preachers, but this started a persecution which culminated in his martyrdom of June of 1844. Joseph Smith was visited by an angel named Moroni, and who informed him of the set of scriptural records which would translate by the gift and power of God. This set of scripture is known as the Book of Mormon, which, quote, tells the story of a family founding a civilization, end quote. The record tells of civilizations that were led out of Jerusalem of 600 BCE and lasted until their demise until 417 CE. As I briefly have mentioned who Joseph Smith Jr. was, let me tell you about a historian. Who is Richard Bushman? Richard Bushman is a Gouverneur Morris Professor Emeritus of History. From 1955 to 1961, he worked on earning a BA, an MA, and a PhD from Harvard. Columbia University notes he has authored various publications on American history and notes his 4 most recognized works. In his testimony to the Faithful Answers of Informed Response Latter-day Saints, he explained that he's a 5th-generation member of the church. During his first semester in graduate school, Bushman was asked by a colleague why he was still a member having such a higher education. quote, not stopping to think, I told him I remained a Mormon because I followed my religion and I became the kind of man I wanted to be, end quote. From being magna cum laude to working at 6 prestigious universities of Columbia, Brigham Young, Brown, Boston, and Harvard, he also led positions of a history department chair, coordinator of history programs. As Columbia noted, his 4 most recognized publications, he has authored 12 major books as well as various historical publication pieces in academia. In 2010, he worked as a co-general editor for the Joseph Smith Papers Project on the History Department of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and chairs the board of directors of Mormon Scholars Foundation. While he may be biased in his writing about his religion due to his faith, this hasn't hindered him academically in his 66 years in the profession. A fellow peer, Turner, said in a review that Bushman's latest work was brilliant. Further, Bushman's peers, quote, most outside the LDS faith, feel themselves standing on somewhat shaky ground when discussing Latter-day Saint teaching, end quote. In reading any of Bushman's work, it's clear he maintains professionalism and strives for an academically sound framework in pursuing of the telling of a story of any subject. For those just learning about or starting or currently are researching, a topic you learn about as well will adopt, especially those writing academically, is a literature review. Literature review. Whether you're trying to conduct a new physics experiment on electricity, examine the cultural influence of Islamic expansion, or study demographics as well as the psychologies of female weightlifters, etc., you will end up looking at what's already been said on any topic. Quote, all research projects are a part of a larger conversation and a larger set of evidence, end quote. The biggest benefit is learning what has already been said about a particular topic, and more importantly, what hasn't been said about the topic. For instance, I found plenty of research on triathlon training, as well as plenty of research on military fitness exams. But what I did not see was those 2 topics combined. That is an indicator for further areas requiring academic exploration. Typically, a literature review starts with the abstract summaries that gives a clue if it's worth reading. Although, as every researcher will come to know, sometimes what you think might be a gem inside you are looking for just isn't there. Now, in framing this importance, in Bushman's biography of Joseph Smith, he did more than just gather a few resources. In a copy of Rough Stone Rolling, you will find 102 dedicated to notes and another 49 pages dedicated to the citations of his sources. What I found admirable in Bushman's literature review is he includes everything, from the favorable pro-Joseph Smith evidence to include the anti-Mormon complaints against Joseph Smith. A researcher may end up combing through hundreds of articles, books, and histories, etc., to find out that maybe 20 or so will make it to the final draft of the paper. Quote, a well-crafted literature review will show the readers the context within the research was conducted, end quote. Normally, for a research paper, the literature review is meant to summarize the existing scholarship. As one will read through Bushman's work, he really left no stone unturned, as can be seen with his exhaustive reference list in the final draft. As a researcher or an author, you are trying to make a point on a particular subject. How does Bushman treat probably one of the most controversial men of the 1800s in context of his biography about Joseph Smith? Poignant paradigm. In a preface of Bushman points out how controversial Joseph Smith history is. That getting an agreed upon consensus of his life story is unlikely. Quote, multiplication of scholarly studies and discovery of new sources have only highlighted the controversies surrounding his life, end quote. I think the success of Bushman's paradigm is he recognizes this controversy. He easily could have left out any unfavorable sources, but that would have been unethical as well unprofessional. Additionally, it would have been an injustice to who Joseph Smith was. By including the good, bad, and ugly, you were better able to grasp a picture of who Joseph Smith was as a man, father, husband, and spiritual leader. Quote, to protect their own deepest commitments, believers want to shield their prophet's reputation, end quote. In his preface, Bushman explains he wants to examine how Joseph Smith, quote, came to be in the age of railroads and the penny press. What was the logic of his visionary life, end quote. As one begins a read through Bushman's work, you begin to see a vision of who Joseph Smith was. There was a vast number of theories trying to explain Joseph Smith and how he came to be such a controversial figure. Whether he was a skilled grifter, con man, maybe suffering some form of mental illness, money digger, etc., most of these paradigms seem to neglect one important aspect. Joseph Smith consistently, without fail, maintained that he was called of God and that he had revelatory gifts attributed to all ancient biblical prophets. The man was hated by the people of his time, and he could have called it quits at any time. From physical abuse, tarring, and feathering, to the death of his children caused by mobs in the night, to distress his family suffered, and all the pains that the early members went through, Joseph Smith had every opportunity to proclaim he was a false prophet and could take off the mantle and live the remainder of his life in peace. On the very morning of his martyrdom, along with his brother Hiram, Joseph was preaching what he felt to be the whole restored gospel of Jesus Christ to his jailers. As Bushman points out, every day Joseph worked to build what he called the kingdom of God on a new Zion in the Americas. What I got from Rough Stone Rolling is a deeper understanding of who Joseph Smith was. What I feel Bushman accomplished in the telling of a poignant story about the simplest paradigm in viewing Joseph Smith. The man thought he was a prophet, so we should try to examine his world through his eyes as much as possible. Responding to a statement about being trusted with power granted to a leader with the devout followers, Joseph said, quote, "I am the only man in whom the world it would be safe to trust with it. Remember, I am a prophet." End quote. Why haven't you read Rough Stone Rolling? While it did take me over a year to read Rough Stone Rolling these last few months, I began to binge read the last quarter of the book. I already knew Joseph was going to die, but I wanted to see how Bushman struck the last chord in his telling of an American prophet's life. My only complaint with the book is I wished I had read it earlier. My recommendation is everyone should read through Bushman's interpretation of Joseph Smith's life. My view is Bushman found that all the ways to examine Joseph Smith's life, the easiest and simplest view, how Joseph did. That he was a man called of God to work in his ministry. The author's 60-plus years as a historian with numerous accolades and professional achievements makes Bushman's work scholarly sound. His expertise in 1700 to 1800 American history is clearly defined and is arguably the best biography of Joseph Smith.